Welcome to our podcast, Top Voices, and these are discussions that we have with thought leaders within the language management industry. And today I am Paula McGrath. I'm the CEO and the owner of International Achievers Group. And beside me here we have Bruno Herman, probably one of the best known and definitely one of the most respected leaders in this industry. And today our guest is Mr. Edwin Trebels, and he is the Translations Director with the Philadelphia Church of God. So thank you for coming to talk with us today. So what we will like to do is maybe get to know you a little more, get to know about your journey, your professional journey, and maybe you can tell us about your organisation and the language management challenges you might have. So I suppose let's get started and find out a little more about you, anything that you're comfortable to tell us. So how did you end up choosing this career, or did this career choose you, or did you suddenly find yourself in this industry?
Thank you for having me on, Paul and Bruno. Much appreciated. It's a great opportunity to meet minds. We have our own in-house translation department with the Philadelphia Church of God, and we've had it for many years, and even the mother organization before this organization had it for decades, always. And that's because it's a non-profit, a charity with a lot of people who would like to volunteer and help. So
okay.
We can get to that later, but we have a lot of volunteer linguists, and that is one of the things that makes us a little different from other organizations. But we have that in-house organization in place, and I got involved a long time ago in 2004.
Okay.
Already as a student. So I was a student at our college, and I studied sports science for 3 years, and then I studied liberal arts at our college for 4 years. And in that second year of my liberal arts education, I joined the work study program in the translation department, just with DTP, so desktop publishing and junior coordination roles. And that was my job for 20 hours a week as a student. And then I did that ever since then, actually. So ever since then, I've just grown in the various roles, and then now I'm the director of the department 20 years later. And so that's how it's happened. So I've been here for a while.
Okay. So how many people are in the organisation, both employees and volunteers? What size is your organisation?
Yeah, the department has 8 full-time staff members, and then 13 part-time and 54 volunteer linguists, mostly volunteer linguists.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a big team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're responsible for managing all those.
That's what they say.
So how do you describe then the mission and vision of your team? So if you're bringing in people, be they volunteers or employees, part-time, full-time, as part of the recruitment process, what is your messaging to these people?
Well, the organization inherently is mission-driven to the point where it's reaching the largest audience possible within 4 specific domains. We function within, of course, religion, but also news and archaeology and youth.
Wow.
And that's also how we split up our linguistic assets.
Okay. Do you mind actually explaining that a little more? So when you say youth, you're trying to reach out to the youth. Is that what that means?
Yes, that's mostly internal, but it's an informal use of language, and therefore we separate that out from the more formal usages.
Okay. So I'm actually just realising, forgive me, I'm just realising that perhaps a large part of your job is actually to service your internal stakeholders, so the people that are a member of your organisation rather than an external market.
Yes, that's right. So we do both. So we have an external market, but we also have our internal community that we service. Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Okay. Are you comfortable in maybe telling us a little more about the organisation itself, so that maybe people can get a little more context? So tell us about
of course. Of course, yeah. The Philadelphia Church of God is it's a global nonprofit. So it's actually headquartered in Edmond, Oklahoma, which is a little bit of a thing that I need to explain oftentimes because it's called the Philadelphia Church of God, but that simply refers to the fact that Philadelphia means brotherly love. And it's also one of the church areas mentioned in the Bible. So it's called the Philadelphia Church of God, but it's not necessarily headquartered in Philadelphia. It's headquartered in Edmond, Oklahoma. And then we have regional offices around the world. So I'm in the UK. I'm in the UK regional office.
Okay.
But we have congregations around the world, several offices around the world. And the interesting thing about of course, the localization or translation department is that it covers the whole area. So it's a global team with people all over the world, and we coordinate also with staff members from different offices who are all within our department.
Wow. Okay. When it comes to the technical part of your job, I have to pass you over to my esteemed colleague here to my left, Bruno. So, Bruno, are you comfortable? You want to jump in now and start out?
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to jump in. So, Edwin, you mentioned your organization, and you mentioned also the fact that, of course, you've been in this space called, globalization, translation, localization for a while. You started even before me in terms of age, because you started as a student, which I didn't. So that's
okay.
That's.
Sorry, I thought Bruno was suggesting that you were older than Bruno, and I'm thinking, sorry, Bruno. I'm certain that's not right.
No, it's but I'm glad that when you mentioned that sort of journey, because you started as a student and you enjoyed this, again, localization, globalization space, because you are still there, as you mentioned. So that's a good statement to tell. I like it. And so, as you know, one of the reasons why people like this space of globalization, localization, is because if you are in this space, you have to manage people, processes, and technology. And what I like to start as a first question is, what would be your secret sauce that you would give to someone new in this space to tell, how to manage those three components, but also how to combine people, processes, and technology to make your work successful?
Right. That's a big question, but it's a really good question.
It's a big one.
It's
an important achievement if you can do that.
You have much time to answer. Don't worry.
No, that's a great question. So, what I do love process management. Just to give you a tiny little bit of background of how I grew up, my dad was in the Dutch army for 35 years in logistics.
Okay.
So as a child, I would stand there and count military vehicles with my dad.
That actually sounds like a young boy's dream, though, truthfully. I think most young boys would love to do that.
Yeah.
Now, I was never a young boy, but I'm assuming lots of young boys.
And on holiday school breaks, I would go to the army base with my dad, and a lot of times I actually would be babysat by the logistics department. So the soldiers and such would show me various components and various organizational mapping and all sorts. So I think what's really important is to understand the various components, see how it works together, see where value is actually added, see where there's actually waste, see there's like a deep understanding of what actually matters and what doesn't matter when it comes to impact at the very end with the end user. So with the military, that's an interesting situation where they have a certain goal in mind, obviously. But then, of course, within the translation department, we also want to make an impact. We don't want to be spending a whole bunch of time and money on something that just is kind of wasted, or it's very slow. Time to market is super slow, or there's not enough products available because the team can't keep up. So technology obviously helps with that, technology is a tool, technology, but it's interesting sometimes to think about what kind of tool. Like for instance, the whole big discussion with AI is that it's a tool, but then a lot of times people will compare it with a knife or a hammer of some sort. Whereas I think of it more, it's more of a powerful tool than that.
Yeah.
But then there has to be care taken, obviously, in order to put the safety and quality guardrails on that tool in order to actually produce the proper end result. So hopefully that doesn't sound too broad and vague. It's just that you have to understand, you have to design a process. So quality has to be assured, quality assurance has to be thought of ahead of time, and the correct QC, quality control steps, have to be put in place, and then you must do quality evaluation of the product, and see what quality control steps have to be fixed. So that's how I see it. How I see it.
No, it's great. I share that view, of course. And the reason why I was asking this big question is also because having been in this space for 30 years this year, so I started in 1994. Yeah, I'm old, I know. But something that I've always noticed, throughout the years, is that most people in this space have a challenge, which is the same, which is to find the right balance between people, processes, and technology. You mentioned, how to best spend time and money. That's exactly what people have in mind when they have to make decisions about how to find the balance, how to strike the balance between people, human resources, business processes, and tools. I think it's better, even better than technology. And so that has been a very important challenge for everybody. But now, these days, since the launch of ChatGPT 2 years ago, the challenge or the discussion is even more sensitive, because of course AI has a number of opponents saying that AI is going to break this balance, and that that AI is going to push people out of the balance. And AI has a number of fans like me who said, these fans are saying, no, it's not going to push people out. It's going to change what people are doing in this balance. So I'm just curious to hear your take or your hope. I don't speak about prediction, because I think making predictions is very risky these days. But how you see that, considering the challenge itself, but also considering the new game changer, which is AI.
Right. So we made some really big progress this year with automation workflow. So we onboarded Blackbird, and Blackbird cut off a whole bunch of manual steps and allowed us to orchestrate all sorts of various tooling, and it allowed especially one person, but there's several people that are heavily affected by this within our organization, but they essentially just are able now to do more meaningful work. They do things that are much more interesting, rather than moving paper around in some ways. Like these workflows are more automated now because of Blackbird, and it's enabling us to create products that we were not able to create before. Because it's not just Blackbird, it's also something. Another example would be synthetic voice. We use that in order to create more accessibility. So we have a visually impaired program, and we use synthetic voice in order to go from text to audio, of course, so that they can listen to the material that we have. So that's actually an accessibility program, and that's great, because we don't have the narrating power to actually do that. So it's creating opportunities for people from an audience point of view to. So that's a really good use of diffusion model AI more broadly. But then we also have just going back again to the time that is saved with automation allows that particular person I'm thinking of to do more meaningful work and thinking about, and improving the content that we have, and also doing more creative jobs, such as desktop publishing, as opposed to the more menial tasks that are really not that interesting. So that's how I see it. So there's definitely a reskilling going on because of that, but it's to a more interesting type of work, towards better work actually, but where the thing that makes human beings unique.
Yeah, and
yeah, that's how I see it.
And you mentioned something about project management, which I think is absolutely critical. You said that, of course, and that's my experience as well. The future project managers will be less people, moving files from one place to another, transactioning files. Actually, it was very transactional, and these people will be more, project managers dealing with data, dealing with flows of data, language data, to create, to acquire, depending. But without data, there is no AI. Simple as that. And without good data, without quality data, there is no quality AI. So, is it in your team today? Because you have project managers. Are those people who are today project managers? Are they embracing this change of framework, or are they just scared?
In our case, I think it might be slightly different because of the reason, because we are a mission-driven nonprofit where they're not scared. They see it as an opportunity to just get more done.
Yeah.
So they like it. I mean, there is a level of change management happening. So, and that's typically on a bell curve where when you first introduce a new idea or a change, then 20% of people hate it, 20% love it, and then there's the 80% in the middle. So that's normal. That's normal. But with any change, but in general, we do the vendor management. We show the tool. We say, okay, well, this is what is possible, and they're like, okay, great. And now all of a sudden, one of our managers, for instance, is our prompt engineer. Several of the managers are involved in our little LangOps team in order to create these automation workflows because they're more technically minded, and we're using things like regular expressions and rules for classification of projects. With an input folder that we created, a hot folder where you can create a file name, and based off that file name, it classifies the workflow, so it goes into the correct project on TMS. It follows the correct thing. It can handle MP3 and doc files. It can do so. In other words, it does transcription or document translation with empty only, or with a human approval involved. So you can make all those selections with our little portal that we created, and that's all empowered by Blackbird. So it's really powerful for us.
Sometimes we speak to business leaders, localization or translation leaders, and they struggle to get the buy-in from those above them because the whole pace of change, but this is nothing new. The pace of change is nothing new. It's probably picked up a little, but it's costly with resources on financial, people, time, all that stuff. Is that something? And I know obviously your organisation, as you've said, is sort of mission driven, but do you ever face that challenge? Do you think where you have to sit with those that signed the checks and say, look, this is coming. This is what we need approval for.
Well, absolutely. That's not necessarily different for us in the sense that we have to make a good case for it, and what is the impact of this particular tool? Like, what will it do? Will it save time, or will it save labor costs, or will it? In our case, a lot of times it's more output driven, so it can well, I can say, for instance, it can save us 40 hours over here, and therefore we can use those 40 hours for to create a wider array of media products, or we can double the output of the linguistic assets. All of a sudden we can do 2 million words instead of 1 million word in this particular target language.
Okay.
And that's of course really impactful, because we do look at it from a marketing point of view. So I am both working in localization and marketing.
Yeah.
So we're looking at our visitors, our website visitors. We're looking at returning visitors. We're looking at downloads. We're looking at subscriptions. We're looking at email subscriptions, as well as magazine subscriptions, literature orders, and that kind of thing, which in our case are all free. Actually, we just give it all out for free. That's just how we operate. But we still look at those numbers from a business point of view to see if something is making an impact or not. And then we either call it back, or we increase something, or we replicate it in other target languages. So all of that information is definitely used for internal proposals, and that then would go to various executives, including our CFO, COO, and so on, and CEO. Definitely, absolutely.
This is actually hugely interesting, because you're in a fortunate enough position to be able to see and measure the correlation between changes you make, investment that's put in with your team, to immediate results. Whereas we speak again to a lot of localization leaders, and they don't have access to that correlation data, and they're the whole time having to justify. I'm not saying that they have a more difficult job than any other leader, but it is a challenge that comes up when a department is seen as a cost department as opposed to a revenue department. It can be a difficult battle, monthly or weekly. We know how often people need to defend their budgets. But then the flip side of it is they don't always have access to the information about the impact on, that they make around growth or increased revenue or whatever. But you're in a fortunate position that you can see that, and which also means that you can change things quickly.
Right, exactly. So that is actually really a big opportunity, I think, for people to break down at least that silo, to where you have that connection between the product being made and then the impact of that. So, I mean, it seems rather pretty logical when you put it that simply, but well, why wouldn't that be connected, right?
No, I know that. But business is seldom that simple in real life.
Yep, I agree. I agree. No, it's actually a very good point, because Edwin, you mentioned that in the beginning of your answer that you are not you are mission driven, so you are not commercially driven, but of course you, even if you are not a business in terms of definition of a business, you are running your team and you are running like a business. And I think that's a great point that I see in some public organizations, European Commission and the public sector. Let's call it the public sector. That of course the public sector is not the private sector. There are differences, but it doesn't prevent the public sector from running their operations like a business. And I think that's very important for the public sector in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, is to say we are not a business, but we can operate like a business. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. There's definitely lessons to be learned there, and it would prevent a lot of waste, for one.
Yeah.
And frustration.
And all sorts of horrible things. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Can I maybe chat with you around talent management? You've obviously got a sizable team. So how do you manage these individuals and manage their talent, their expectations? And how do you manage your own expectations? And I don't know what your own personal ambitions might be around growth, professional growth. How do you handle those challenges, particularly with such a sizable team?
Well, onboarding is very important, first of all, to understand a person really well. One of the first questions I often ask people when I meet them is, what do you really enjoy doing?
Yeah.
What is it that you really enjoy? But then I go deeper, because they often will say something specific to an industry. But then I say, but what is it that you enjoy about that? Because what it is that they enjoy actually can usually be applied in many different industries or many different areas. So we try to get to know people really well before even starting any work, really. Now, obviously, there's a quick understanding of certain skills that people will have, and then you clearly are going to go into a certain area. But even then, it's still important to understand maybe what they are interested in doing in the future. They might be locked into something for the initial spurt, but then where do they see themselves? So it's good to talk to people and respect that and understand them really well. So we do spend a fair amount of time doing that, and then try to talk to people regularly. We do have a work study program that I was a part of 20 years ago. We still have that. So a lot of our new talent actually comes from that work study program. So they are often with us already for at least a year, if not 2 or 3 years. Usually the first year they have to put in their hours on something like landscaping or custodial, but then eventually they start moving into jobs that we're more involved in, and then you start to get to know them. And they often change direction, which is why it's so important to really understand people very well, and then we've developed them. So we develop them from a student, and they often are the ones that we hire from that pool of people. So in other words, we have a connection with a educational institution.
Okay.
So that's a big opportunity that we're making the most of, for sure.
Do you have to manage much conflict with your team? I think an assumption, this is maybe what I'm guilty of, making an assumption that the individuals that might be attracted to your organisation might be conflict averse. But that's just an assumption on my part. I could be miles out here. So, but do you have to manage conflict? Are you like every other HR department or team leader problems?
Right, there is overlap. I'm not sure if we have the same amount of conflict that I've seen in other organizations that I worked at. Well, I do know for sure, actually. That's not even close. It's much smoother. Yeah. It's much smoother where we are than in all of other organizations I've been a part of. And it's of course because we have a community that agrees with the direction, the general direction.
Your culture probably.
And the culture is. We're all of one mind in many ways as far as like what we're trying to accomplish. So that reduces conflict to very little. That being said, there are miscommunications that happen either through omission or commission, or something maybe was said that wasn't quite put in the most glowing terms. But that's normal in many ways, of course. But I would say it's actually very, very minimal.
Okay. I'd say that people that are going to watch this and will see this are going to be hugely envious of that.
Actually, I have a question on something you just mentioned, which is I need to know, or I need to get to know people. When I interview them, I need to sort of, gauge what they have inside them. And it's a very interesting point because I've read in some magazines that some people, so just don't get me wrong, it's not a general statement from the HR community, but some people in the HR community believe that tomorrow, maybe in 6 months or 1 year, AI will be able to get to know people during recruitment processes. In other words, that the machines will be able to get to know humans, which is, when you think about it, which is quite a unlogical in a way. Well,
But there's already tools in place. Sorry, we'll just have a little aside conversation.
Yeah.
There's already tools in place that can do. Oh my God, what's that word?
They can assist. They can assist recruiters.
Well, yeah, and honestly, they've been in place for years and years and years. So those, those where they test your personality and they test your technical skills and all that.
Yeah.
Beyond that, to suggest that a machine is going to
replace.
But they're already in place. You know what I mean? So they're already there. They might not be as sophisticated as AI, but the next stage of that is for a brain to actually look and say, do you know something? You've actually checked all these boxes, but that doesn't still mean you're the right fit. But that takes a human brain, I would suggest.
It's sentiment analysis.
I don't know that it's sentiment. I think it can be based on people use the word gut feeling. I hate that phrase. I think what we sometimes call gut feeling is actually based on our own experiences and our history and our education. And so if in the past you've hired somebody that they ticked all the boxes, but something didn't quite gel, but you can't quite put it on your finger on it. I think that comes into part of our history and our experiences, and I think that impacts our decision making next time round. Some people call it gut feeling. I don't know how that's going to be replaced. Now, I am not a technologist.
But that's what I was going to ask Edwin,
sorry.
because no, don't worry. It's from your perspective, Edwin, being a recruiter, being a hiring manager, would you agree with those people saying that in 6 months AI will be able to do the full recruitment process, that it will not be an agent that will assist recruiters, but that it will be an agent that will replace recruiters? Would you agree with those futurist people, or do you believe that this might happen, but not before years from now?
Right. Well, there's a lot of development happening, so it is hard to predict what it will be capable of in the future. But I don't see a short or medium term or even long term future where that is really given over to a machine. Personally, in my mind, there's too many ramifications involved with something like that, and there's too much information, there's too much insight, there's too many variables that can be calculable even by a machine. So I find it quite dangerous, and I also don't see the point of it, because it's not the machine that is going to work with that person. It's me who's going to work with that person. So why would I let the machine decide who I'm going to work with? Like, it doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem like a good use case for me. I do see an assist happening with that. Now, I don't know enough necessarily about the human resource field to understand all the use cases within human resources. But one of the issues with that, of course, also is that people, instead of learning from how it's done, they will rely on it, and then when it breaks, over a long period of time, they won't know that it went wrong, and that's also an issue.
I don't understand the context of that last
bit. What I mean with, like, you need to have expertise to understand when something goes wrong.
Oh yes.
And expertise goes out. Yeah. And expertise goes out the window if certain tools are relied on over too long of a time period. So that's a challenge I see with all of that.
That reminds me, 100 years ago, I was going to be a partner in a firm of accountants, and my original training is working in firms of accountants. And I was very junior in this firm, and I used to run a portfolio of payroll clients. And then as I was progressing through the organisation, I was expected to bring in a trainee and train another young person coming through. So because of my age, and when I started, it was all I had to learn the payroll process, apart from the fact, obviously, I had qualifications, but I had to learn the payroll process manually. I had to actually work. You have to do steps 1 through 20 manually. And then, of course, very early on, that became so you buy software packages very early on. So, but I had actually learned it manually. So then the next person I was handed was this, by my boss, gave me this young person to train. And my boss said to me, "Oh, you don't need to teach this person the manual steps. Just teach them the digital steps." Mm. So I did what I was told. I was a young person myself, did what I was told. And then, of course, this young person had to run it by me every Friday before the button was pressed for the bank. And because I had been doing it for 2 years at that stage, I very quickly got used to seeing what the bottom line should be. So I could look at the top line. So let's say you earned £100 a week. I knew what it should roughly translate to very quickly on the bottom line. And after about 4 or 5 weeks, this young person handed me this sheet, and I'm looking at the top, bottom, and I realised, I don't know, some percentage of the numbers were wrong. This young person had no clue, didn't know, but also didn't know how to identify where the problem was because they hadn't been taught manually. Mm. Now, I'm not suggesting we go backwards in time. I don't think that's the best use of anybody's time or energies. But I'm just agreeing with what you said.
Mm. Right. There's just certain basics that have to be understood, and I think it's just wise to make sure that those basics are taught at one point or another by somebody in the value process. So another very quick example is that my grandfather was in the Navy in the World War II times, and they would learn how to press all the fancy buttons in order to operate the boat and the machines, but they would also still learn the original way of navigating with by the stars and so on. And my grandfather used to drive his car by the stars. So it's not necessarily the safest way, but he would literally bend over and he's like, "There's the North Star, son," and then he would follow and adjust his direction based off that. But he knew how to do it, which is remarkable.
It is.
But it also shows an opportunity when systems break or when things actually do go haywire, then he would actually know how to handle that. So there is a certain level of expertise, in other words, that needs to be quite deep to make sure that all of this goes right moving forward.
How did you not end up in the armed forces, with a history like that?
Well, we refer to ourselves as a spiritual army a lot of times. So so a lot of the concepts copy over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's and well, you mentioned the human factor, which is very important, and another facet of the human factor is not just your team that you have to manage, but it's also the way you work with your suppliers, right? Because you work with LSPs or SLVs or different types of suppliers. So, just out of curiosity, has the sort of the not just the AI hype, but the sort of progress in automation, has this changed your way of using suppliers, external suppliers, to make them, maybe to have less suppliers, but to involve them more in your processes? Or has this just kept the situation the same for you?
We have been strategically and tactically independent from the beginning as much as we possibly can. What that means is that we do as many things as we can do internally, a lot of times with volunteers, which keeps the cost down tremendously.
Yep.
But we do use language technology. We use vendors where we need to. The tooling at the moment is actually really empowering us. So it is a challenge to LSPs, I think, in the sense that we can do things ourselves.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree.
So in other words, LSPs do have to really make sure that they're adding value. Otherwise, we'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you are spot on, because Paula knows that this is one of my favorite topics. When I work with just a couple of LSPs right now who are my clients, and I keep saying not to provoke them, but to tell them
Direct.
to be honest with them. Let's say that if they don't switch to other operations, other types of tasks and roles, they will, they at some point they might just be out of the picture, just because obviously clients will say, okay, now we invested in generative AI, we can do things on our own which we couldn't do before, because before for NMT or for for translation memories we needed some external expertise, but now we implement generative AI whatsoever for other purposes, for content creation, content testing, etc. So if there is a risk, well, I call that a risk for them to be out of the picture, because to your point, they wouldn't be seen as creating value for clients, because clients would say, why would we pay somebody externally to do things we can do internally? And I see this trend, and that's why I'm happy to work at least with a couple of LSPs to actually tell them, I see a number of organizations, including in the public sector, that are internalizing or insourcing operations that used to be managed by LSPs, not just for the cost, but for other reasons like safety, like time effectiveness. And you know what? When I say that, I made a presentation on that during Block World last year in the US. Most people were criticizing me because they said, "Oh, Bruno, this is not going to happen. LSPs will be always needed." So, don't believe that. It's technology can really enable clients more than ever to do things on their own. And I'm glad you mentioned exactly what I said. It's not well perceived in the LSP world, because sometimes they might agree with me, but they would be, Bruno, don't tell that. It's not going to happen. But I'm glad you mentioned this sort of side effect of technology, AI, but automation in general, that in clients, organizations, not just the big ones, but also small startups, might be able to use technology to manage or to internalize operations like translation, localization, more than ever before. And I think that can be a game changer for suppliers.
Can I just ask a question following on from that? So if you were coaching an LSP now, what could they offer you, say to you, do for you that would even make you take a meeting? Is there anything at all?
Good question.
Good question. In general, it would be if we are needing certain services that we cannot do internally. So there's just a simple, specific need. That's actually one of the biggest reasons. And then it would be inside, like if they are more up to date than I am, then
Okay.
I will be interested in talking to them, like in either consultancy fashion, which is difficult actually because we're trying to be really up to date with everything. But I would imagine that not everybody is like that. So I would think that consultancy is very important, especially with this boom of technology. And then language technology is just so important right now.
Yeah.
All my budget proposals are going to language technology.
Yeah.
It's all language technology.
And I would assume
important.
that's the main reason why you decided to work with Blackbird, which I know as well. I know another Bruno, who is leading Blackbird, and I knew other organizations that are also using Blackbird to automate more and also to connect the dots between different tools and systems. I think what I hear is always the same reason, is that they can offer something that we cannot do in-house, or that we can do in-house, but it's going to be more expensive. And then Blackbird comes to play as a cost and time effective option. Yeah.
Right. So, and vendor management, of course. So one of the issues currently with the new technologies that are available is that there's also a lot of like wrappers, where you don't really understand the depth of an offering. Like, is it just a wrapper of OpenAI, or is it actually a robust enterprise level system? So I do think that there is a lot of vendor management that LSPs could help with as a service. Because it does take a lot of time to do the vendor management, even of language technology, and therefore that's a big opportunity, because we're just going to see a boom of more and more of those supposed language technologies, but what is the quality of them, and how robust are they, and how, so it's very important to understand all of that. So that's another opportunity, I would think.
You've just reminded me of something, so I had to make a note of it. Obviously, in my own business, it's an ongoing challenge to justify the need for us, particularly the point that Bruno made earlier. Why don't people just press a number of buttons and then find all their staff that way? So there has got to be a worthwhile offering. Now, in our case, at the moment, with the services that organisations like mine offer, it's actually a staff replacement offering, in effect, as opposed to a digital replacement offering. But sorry, it's just an observation there and a comment, because it's always interesting to hear other people talk about their organisations, and the learnings that we can all get, we can all take.
Yeah.
One question I forgot to ask you, Edwin, in the beginning, because I think it's very important for the audience, is you mentioned, of course, that your organisation is very truly global. So totally agree with that, of course. But in your experience, after so many years in this organisation, what are the most challenging languages or markets that you have to address in this global scope, let's say?
Yeah. Low resource languages are a big challenge, partially because we don't necessarily have volunteers for those languages. So then it does actually become a situation of okay, can we do that? Can we support that? How do we do that? Well, with a language provider, we could do that. But then it becomes an issue of is that justified? So yeah, and that is also a budgetary question, of course. So if we want to reach a certain specific target language, then that is definitely a challenge with low resource languages. Because also just a lack, we also have, it's more of a black box situation sometimes, where you just don't really understand what the output means, or what is that good, or can we use, is this actually properly localized?
Exactly.
So you need to include more people, which of course adds more and more costs and time and so on. But we have one particular language that's really interesting that we were launching recently, but we did have an academic step that we were adding to it because of we had a lady who was able to check the content for that specific domain, which was archaeology, and she will check that, and but that is an added quality control step that costs more money and time. So that's definitely a challenge to find the right expertise at the right steps.
Yeah, it's actually. Oh, sorry, Paula.
No, just a thought I had. It's interesting that your organisation's growth is possibly led by your department rather than the other way around, which is what we normally hear.
In the international content strategy and such, a lot of it that does actually go through this department. Yeah, so we have what is it that we put out in this language, and what language, and so on.
So what languages you can get access to has an impact on what growth or where the growth can be.
Absolutely, but that is why we are in very close contact with our leadership in order to talk about those opportunities and challenges at the same time. So we're very closely connected with our leadership because of that.
It's normally the other way around. It's normally the pro localization team have to run like fury after the marketing and sales teams.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, it's cultural in a way, but I hear many leaders of localization, globalization teams having to sort of, they have to lobby, the headquarters, because obviously, the headquarters are in the US, and in the US, there I mean, culturally and historically, the need for language management is less obvious than in Europe or in Asia, that are very multilingual regions. And they say, well, you know, I hear recently, I was talking to a leader of a European company, European branch of a US company, and she said to me that she had to fly to the US to spend a few days to make presentations to, you know, the global leadership team, just to explain and justify why language management was a must and not just an option. And that's, as you said, Paula, this is usually what happens. But in your case, you know, it sounds like you don't have. It's probably the opposite. You know, it's the global leadership that has to lobby you to actually say, well, please, Edwin, please, you know, make sure that we address that language.
Right. Well, it's not. I wouldn't call it lobbying, but
well, yeah.
I think you're not quite getting.
You know, you know, we're a support function, like in a lot of ways. So if they say, well, we'd like to do this, then we do that. Because we want to support the overall direction of the organization. But in a lot of ways, what you're describing, it was actually the opposite, because I actually lived at our headquarters, and then specifically in order to grow this area, I moved to the United Kingdom in order to be closer to our target languages and target audiences. And that way we were more connected and so on. So it actually grew out from this office in the UK, in support of what we were doing at headquarters. But yeah, in that sense, it was the opposite. So instead of me going over there, I actually went away from it. But we're very closely connected, you know.
It's a nice way to put it. I mean, I don't hear that every day, Edwin. You know, you are one of the few people who say that to me. It's really, you know, it's totally, and it makes a lot of sense. Don't get me wrong. What you say makes, in my mind, a lot of sense. But it is so different from what so many people have to do to get their operations going. You know, it's
also, I mean, I come from a purely commercial background, but it also sounds like it makes an awful lot of commercial sense. I mean, I don't know, but I'm also, right now, I started to laugh because I was trying to picture what your annual personal staff appraisal is with your boss when he's watching you run to the airport with your suitcases in tow and you're heading off to another country. Now, I do obviously understand, I'm being facetious, I do understand that it is to try and help drive the overall mission of the organisation. I know that. It's just, it would be very interesting staff appraisal to sit in and watch. Very different.
Yeah, it's just, but it is very good to just, I mean, it kind of goes back to the human resources question, where it's just good to be on the ground, where the action is happening, whether that's with your audience or whether that's with your staff or your volunteers. You know, you want to be that a person that understands what's going on. I was studying Toyota Kata recently, which has to do with the factories, you know, the car manufacturing, which actually has a lot of lessons, I think, for process management in general, because they have the you know, the Toyota production system, and they look at the people on the line that are closest to the actual work being done as knowledge workers. And they learn from those folks to see what is actually happening on the ground, and in order to make improvements. And then they have the freedom to experiment and try to fix some of those issues and learn. But the senior leadership is encouraged to walk that floor regularly in order to understand what's actually happening, rather than being locked away in some sort of supposedly important content strategy meeting in an office somewhere distant from where the action is actually happening. So it's very good to be close to the action.
Are you an advocate of remote workers in general, not necessarily for your organisation, but in general, or hybrid, or all in the office, or what are your thoughts on that?
In general, it's good to have close contact. I think and that can be through virtual meetings. So I think that there are opportunities for those kinds of opportunities. In general, we have our staff in the office, but we have staff all over the world, and again, we work with volunteers, and they don't work in the office, so we work with them wherever they are. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
And at whatever time, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm the same with my little team. I'm the only person that lives in Ireland, so I'm available. Not quite 24/7, but not far off it sometimes. But I'm honestly very grateful for the team that I have, so I don't mind where they live.
And as you said, just to circle back on the human resource question, I had a quick question for you regarding the skills that you are expecting or requiring for your team members, and then maybe also for yourself, when you are developing yourself. What would be the 2 or 3 major skills that are important for you today? And if those skills are different, what would they be, in the next couple of years? Do you see some new skills more important than today, and some skills that are important today be less important? Because I refer to this famous sentence: you have to learn and you have to unlearn. So you have to learn new things, and you have sometimes to unlearn things that you know, because otherwise you are going to be stuck in the way you work. So what would be your take regarding the skill situation today and the skill expectation?
Right. So in the first place, I think that narrow-mindedness is not a good thing in this situation. We need to make sure that we have an open mind towards new opportunities when it comes to technologies and skills. There's just simply different tools being released all the time now at the moment that are really useful, as long as you're willing to try them out and do them. So I think in some ways the answer to your question in a lot of ways has more to do with a mindset, I think, rather than specific skills. The mindset is really crucial because without a certain mindset of innovation and experimentation, and then a good quality control, so none of that is going to be really useful. Whatever situation we're in the next 6 to 12 months, we need to make sure that we are learning all the time. I'm currently learning more about large language models and its opportunities, but also its limitations. So, starting to study more and more about that. So in my role, also as / vendor manager, I am studying the technology, how it works, and what it really can't do. Or when does it hallucinate, and how can you reduce that hallucination, and so on and so on. So I'm studying all of that very in depth. The managers, they are, in our case, in our LangOps team, they do also have a technical skill set that they need to have at this point. So that there's a regular there's classifications, there's low code opportunities. Like Blackbird is no code, low code, but you still need really some technical expertise. You do need some solution architects involved, and people need to understand what those solution architects can do and not do, and what they require. How do you communicate? So communication skills, that's another one.
Yep.
How do you create bridges between all these various components that are necessary? So you've got your linguists, you've got your engineers, so how do you learn to communicate between all of those? That's also my role, but also I think a project manager role. They need to understand the various aspects of their jobs. So just to try to make bullet points, it's an open mindset, it's a communication situation, it's a technical learning. You don't have to create large language models yourself necessarily, or even, but fine tuning is important. So how do you do that? How do you fine tune something? How do you fine tune a model? Yep. Well, that's it. I think that'll be important. Prompt engineering is another skill.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you mentioned about those technical skills, because I think that sometimes people are a bit reluctant or scared to learn technical matters or technical things. And I keep saying to them when I was, leading teams, I was always saying something in line with what you just said, which is that you don't have to understand the whole technology, but you have to understand how to use it to create value. In other words, you have to be a technical guy, but you have to understand where to take technology so that it creates something for the rest of the business. And that's the difference, because of course, as you said, you have to understand how to create a model, but you don't have to create yourself models, but you understand what it is, and then if you understand what it is, you are able to say, I'm going to use it there, but not there, etc. So it is, I'm not sure, Paula, if you had that experience with candidates, but sometimes candidates are a bit, I wouldn't say scared, but they are a bit reluctant to, talk about technical skills, because they think that they will be required to be, to become, to code or to be programmers, whereas, they just need to understand what it is. Yeah.
Honestly, I think that varies from human to human. I think you're always going to get humans that are happy to embrace what's coming at them and handle it. Mm-hmm. And you're always going to get humans who, unfortunately, are fearful of life and lots of things. And that dictates how they approach their job, but it also probably, unfortunately, dictates how they approach everything. Mm-hmm. I've never in my life experienced a whole block of behaviour. Well, sorry, within, and that's a bit black and white, that statement, but no, I honestly, over the years, it varies so much from human to human, and how we are is obviously, where does that all come from, the whole famous nature and nurture argument. Mm-hmm. That's my experience, so.
No, it's something that I noticed as a hiring manager, and
I actually think that getting access to the candidates that are the right fit for your organisation has always been a challenge, will always be a challenge.
Yep.
And the issue is identifying what is essential to your organisation and being able to communicate that very clearly through a recruitment process, and being able to identify the negotiables and non-negotiables through an interview process. Because a lot of us, and I've been guilty of it myself in the past, we're not black and white enough about that at the interview process, and as humans we're inclined to, I meet you, most people are decent human beings, so you like them, you're sitting at an interview and you like them, and we're not always clear enough about very nice, he comes across as a very nice individual, but I haven't actually really questioned the whole thing that I say is one of my non-negotiables, and then suddenly the person is working with you. So when organisations say, we've met people and they don't seem flexible enough, the problem has started not when the problem started at the interview. You know what I mean? Not when the person came and took their job and is with you 6 months in and you're realising that person is not very flexible. I know, but was that even looked at the interview? That's my experience of it.
No, it's well, one question that just popped up in my mind. You mentioned in your career that you started already as a student to be involved in your organization. So today we have on the screen, we have the Edwin of 2024. What would you say to the same Edwin 20 years ago? What kind of advice would you say to that younger Edwin? And what would you say to do or not to do that you have done yourself?
Knowing what you know now.
Yeah. So, in other words, it's to compare the Edwin of today to the Edwin of 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think one thing that has happened over the last 20 years with me is that I was also involved with other areas, other departments, and so on, which sometimes caused me to delve into those and then lose track of other departments and so on. So I think if I had advice, I would say make sure that you stay connected with your industry, and make sure that you stay connected with peers in your industry, but not just your peers, also the CEOs of all of those companies, to see, or other folks like CTOs, to see where are they headed, what are they developing, what are they thinking about, and stay in the loop with all of that, and and continuously, relentlessly learn new things about what is happening, what are other people doing, and so on. So I think I would do that better. If that's one area, I would make sure that I would be much more connected with the industry, much more connected with the folks working in the industry. So that secondarily, I think I would be more organized about my process management analytics. I kind of have a almost an organic understanding of process management, which like an intuitive understanding, but that's not as necessarily as good as a more analytical approach, where I understand the metrics much better. So I think if I was to go back, I would set up the metrics more tightly, and I would track that much better, rather than doing that more recently. So I think those are probably two areas. There's probably many more, but I don't want to keep babbling necessarily. I would say also to do more what I was saying earlier in this session, to really listen to people. I would be more. I try to understand people a lot more. So over the years, I learned that much better as I matured as well. From a 20-something-year-old now in early 40s, I understand more that it's very, very important to really listen to what's going on in people's minds, and also to regularly tune in with them about that, so that you can make sure that people are in the right position, they're headed in the right direction, they feel happy about what they're working on. They also understand what they're meant to be working on, so there's no wasted time and that kind of thing for them as well. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to learn. Nobody wants to work on a project and then you later learn, like, oh, what were you doing? Why were you wasting so much time on? Like, you don't need to do that, So that's terrible. So that's just horrible project management, like to just kind of let people go and then they end up not creating meaningful work, and then you tell them that afterwards, or they see that, and that's not right. That's not right. So I think it's very important to just be in tune with everybody you work with, as well as just being in tune with what your organization is trying to accomplish. What is actually important? What is an important thing to look at? And which is why we look at things like returning visitors, because we can't force people to return as a visitor. So what are we doing that is increasing that or decreasing that, right? So that's really important.
Yeah.
I think, though, some of those things you said, I think every human is guilty or responsible, has done the same thing and does the same thing. It's like wanting the old head on the young shoulders, or whatever. Is that the right way around? Yeah, wanting an older head on the young shoulders just doesn't exist. Because I think when I saw your LinkedIn profile, you made reference to the fact that you're a parent. So you obviously, I'm assuming you're experiencing what every parent experiences, no matter how many times you tell your children, oh my God, if you do that, this is going to happen. It doesn't stop them from doing that. They have to live their life, and we have to live it and realise, quick, turn left, that was the wrong way.
Yeah.
So,
well, there is I think it was Steve Jobs. It must be Steve Jobs who had this great statement when he was talking to young people joining Apple, that he said, okay, don't expect to make no mistake, but you have to make mistakes well, which means that you have to make mistakes because you have to learn from your mistakes. If you don't make any mistake, we will never learn something, because obviously everything will be so easy that you will never question what you are doing. And I think it was right to make mistakes well is important, because it means actually making mistakes, but of course learning from these mistakes. So I think this is a great statement, because many people feel guilty sometimes, to your point, guilty of making mistakes. But who doesn't make any mistake? Only people who do nothing make no mistake. That's
I had an older lady who was a supervisor of mine years ago, and she said to me, "The person that makes no mistakes makes nothing."
Yeah, exactly.
They were her exact words.
Yeah, it's
wasn't always comforting enough for me, honestly, but when I was in a good place, it was a good, comforting statement.
Yeah. That's life. I mean, you mentioned it. When you are young, you are doing this. When you are older, you're doing that. So every stage has a different.
I know. Living experience.
Yeah.
This, living this life is actually quite complicated and quite difficult, and can be difficult for people to balance their own beliefs with having a worthwhile and an outwardly measured, successful life. Do you have any ideas around how we can do that and still feel like we have achieved for our employer and for our families and for our community as a whole?
Right, thank you. Yeah, there's a very careful balance to strike to make sure that we are essentially fulfilling our responsibilities and also desires, but we need to measure ourselves. Somebody told me once, a man who was much wiser than me, he came to me when I was very young, and he stood in front of me and he grabbed me by the hands and he said, "Edwin, you have to measure yourself." And he said, "Don't make the mistake of driving yourself to the ground so much that you just out of the picture at one point in a very short-term manner. You have to measure yourself," he said, and he said you have to think about what are all the important things in life and make sure that you balance all of that. Navigating this world has tremendous challenges, I think, for all of us, but I think making sure that we understand our position, like where are we in life, and then where do we, how can we help other people in the very best way possible. I think it's a very healthy approach to life, which includes, in my case, my family, my wife. I've got 4 children. I've got 2 dogs. I've got friends and family. And then we have all our work responsibilities, with the localization and all of its technologies. And then, to a certain extent, I think, and a responsibility towards the industry as well to help further the industry and to see maybe what learnings that are there and what silos can be broken down in order to have a healthy way forward in order to cooperate and actually reach the goals that are the most important, as opposed to what you were referring earlier to infighting and that kind of thing, or perhaps mismarketing is a term just making up at this point in time. But marketing something that is not actually a proper product, I think that breaks down trust, and I think building up trust is very important. So if we can build up trust by having honest conversations, then I think we're going to be in a much better position 6 months from now. But I think that in a lot of ways we are actually breaking down trust from what I've seen with miscommunications and with improper product marketing and that kind of thing. So I think I do think that we have to be very careful as an industry, but also as individuals, in order to be true and honest.
It's interesting. It's 2 thoughts have come to my mind, following on from what you've just said there. I think too many of us live a fear-based life right from the get-go. From the time sometimes you see young children and the things they say to each other or the way they behave, and then the way sometimes people mark their bodies. I mean, I think that too many of us live a fear-based life, and what comes with fear, as you can imagine, I think that for me, I'm no specialist, I'm not a trained psychologist, I'm just a businesswoman, but I think that from fear, I think too many of us say and behave in such a dreadful way, which then has such a negative impact on everything. It has a negative impact on business success. It has a negative impact on family success. Has a negative impact on keeping marriages alive. You know, and not all marriages should survive. I personally believe that. But however, I do think that fear-based living is actually the cause of an awful lot of problems in the world. It's an awful lot of problems within companies, within relationships between managers and their teams within each other. And the other thing that really now, and honestly it's only been drawn to my attention since Bruno and I started to do these podcasts, people using the word transparency. I cannot understand. 20 years ago, and I'm a 60-year-old woman, so 20 years ago I was still an adult woman, I have no memory of people using that word every second sentence. I don't understand why we have to tell each other we're transparent. I don't understand that. To me, like, just tell people. I mean, I know sometimes there are obviously commercial sensitivities that you can't blurt out everything to your team or to other suppliers. I understand that. I'm not suggesting that changes. But I don't understand why people can't honestly say, I don't agree. But that doesn't mean it turns into a boxing match, or I'm sorry we can't go with you, or I'm sorry you're not the right supplier for us, or yes you are the right supplier, or I'm a potential supplier pitching for business, and do you know the truth is I desperately want your business, and I'll be ready in 3 months for it, or I'm ready now, or just, I don't understand that. I really don't. So that for me is my contribution to that comment you just made. And how do we teach our children? How do we then encourage each other to try and not live from some of the relationships that we're in? Because the world is only made up of a whole load of small communities. That's all it is. So how do we encourage each other? You know, those in our communities, and we're all most of us are part of a number of different communities, to encourage non-fear-based relationships and non-fear-based friendships and non-fear-based engagement. That for me is the number one. Number two is, oh my Lord, don't be thinking you have to be transparent. Just be decent and honest.
Honest, but that's usually my answer to you when you talk about transparency. I don't use that word so often, but I use the word honesty. You mentioned, there is nothing worse than being narrow-minded. And I think that obviously, a number of narrow-minded people, in my experience, are not honest. They are just trying to hide something, But I think that transparency, indeed, I don't use that word because for me, it's all about honesty. It's being, honest with people, being some people call it authentic, but being honest is already a big step forward, because then you can have a relationship which is based less on fear and more on what is really going on, the good sides and the bad sides. So I think that's usually how I take it. But I agree with you. Many people use transparent or transparency, but personally, no, less than that. So.
If anybody sits in front of me and tells me that I'm being transparent here, it's almost about as exciting as them telling me I brushed my teeth this morning. That's what it sounds like. That's great. Yeah, congratulations. Truthfully,
well, if you take it like that, obviously it's going to be. It's going to be very different.
But that's honestly how I'm sitting sometimes in discussions and meetings with people, and they're congratulating themselves because they're supposedly being transparent. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's marvelous. Thanks.
Yeah. The one that's, I think it's interesting, very good points. What I would say regarding honesty is also that it is very helpful if that honesty is well educated. Like if a person is not just honest, but is really up to date with what they're talking about, and otherwise also just to understand, have the humility to understand that they can learn from other people. Like a goal of mine is always to see, okay, what is it that I can learn from this person? And actually, a friend of mine, he has a personal goal he shared with me this week. He said that he is trying to, when he's listening to people, he's trying to really listen and understand what they're saying rather than think of the next thing you're going to say.
Yeah.
So I think that's really underrated, that skill of listening and learning. And then therefore you become more educated, which is more useful. And then when you are being honest, you are actually also a really useful contributor in the situation.
Yeah. And the other thing that actually fascinates, I actually think each of us is guilty of underestimating everybody. I think, and that to me, it goes back to that, I think, out of fear that we feel more safe and more comfortable if we put people in a box or put people into a particular class in our head very quickly. So then you're not open to, oh my God, that's really interesting. Oh my God, I've learned that today. That's my experience. I mean, don't ever try not to. And I'm saying this, I'm guilty of an awful lot of this stuff myself from time to time, but just don't underestimate people. Every single person you meet. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's what you're going to learn is not what you want to learn, or not what you want to see, or not what you want to experience, but don't underestimate people.
Yeah. Well, in the business world, this is the sort of advice that many people are, sharing, is that don't pay attention to the job title. Pay attention to what people are doing. You might have somebody who is an SVP and who is doing a very bad job, but he's a SVP, so it's a glittering job description or title, and you might have a very young junior project manager doing great things. And it's not because he's junior, it's not because he's young, that you have to underestimate what this person can do and will do. So, yeah.
My young team blow my socks off. I actually was talking to Bruno, and they're young, capable women. And I was saying this to Bruno outside before we came in here this morning. Honestly, they blow my socks off. Now, there's things that I know how to do that they still don't know how to do because they're still young. No. But my Lord, the stuff that they have insights into that I'm like, oh my God, I missed that altogether. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah. So I actually love what you just said, Paula, where you're not underestimating people, because people really have a lot to offer when you understand what they have to offer. But a lot of people are hesitant to share that, and you do have to have a lot of trust in a relationship in order to learn that. And listening is one way to build up trust very quickly. The other thing I think is what's really important is to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
And do it readily and publicly when you can, and that allows for very specific encouragement to individuals. And I try to do that to companies. I try to tell companies publicly or in person. I say I love this. The specific thing, and I think it's really great. And to me, what would be great is if you did this and this. So, but I try to be very specific, and I'm not trying to be patronizing, but it is actually very good with children too. So when you have little children, which I have many of, I have four of them. You want to be. This is a bit of a child rearing lesson now, but you don't want to be too generic with your praise. You don't want to say you are the most incredible child I have ever seen. That's not right. What's very good is this particular thing you did is wonderful. This was just fantastic what you just did there in this manner. That's great. And now I think what you should work on is this little thing, so to be specific with that kind of encouragement is really, really good and very helpful. And that way they also have things to do and they also understand what I appreciate about them. So I don't just do that with children. I do that with companies. I do that with my colleagues in a respectful manner. Of course, it's different when you're speaking to an adult, to a professional adult or a CEO or something. Yeah. But in many ways, it's not different. Like I tell CEOs all the time, I like this specific thing that you just did.
Yeah, but that actually requires intentionality and effort. Mm-hmm. Be it with children or your colleagues or your boss. And a lot of us don't put the time in for the intentionality.
Right.
I look back myself. We have a foster daughter, she's a grown woman now. I look back at myself and the times I said something very generic to her, and within a heartbeat I knew from her face she didn't believe me. And then I thought, okay, failure, quick, backpedal here. That was a failure, Paula. You just didn't put the time in here. But we're all, anyway, that's, we probably need to, this is very interesting. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you a little better. Thank you for doing this. So I'm going to say thank you again, Edwin, for joining us. And we've learnt a lot. Yep. I've definitely learnt a lot about your organisation. I believe I've learnt a lot about you. And look forward to perhaps bumping into each other in some sort of professional capacity somewhere on the road. So, and Bruno, as usual, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as I said in the beginning, thank you again very much for accepting this invitation very quickly and very effectively, because I share what Paula just said. We learned a lot. We touched some great topics, not just AI, as most people would expect, but we're also touching human matters. So I think that's why this conversation has been really great and much appreciated. Yeah.
The other thing, sorry, before we eventually do stop this, it's been helpful. I think that some of the advice that you've given will be useful and helpful to people that will watch this, particularly maybe smaller LSPs who are trying to find a way to overcome the challenges that they are having in trying to win business. So thank you again for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's us done. Thank you very much.